She said it like it was a favor, like offering me a job in my own son's house. After I'd cooked, cleaned, rocked her babies to sleep, missed doctor's appointments for myself just to help, and then she asked, "Would you mind being the nanny officially?" I was holding my grandson at the time, his little fingers curled around mine. I still remember the sound of the pacifier in his mouth, the soft lullaby playing in the background, and the way my daughter-in-law Camille didn't even look up from her phone when she said it. The air left my lungs. The woman I once thought of as family had just downgraded me to staff. Not out of cruelty. No, Camille was too polished for open cruelty. She wore it like perfume, subtle, lingering, sickly sweet. And my son Andrew, he stood there and said nothing, not a word, just rubbed the back of his neck like he was watching strangers argue on TV, not witnessing his mother being offered a job title in place of dignity. And that's when I knew this wasn't just one comment. It was a decision, a shift, a new status being assigned to me not as mom, not even as grandma, but as a convenience, a background character, someone to fetch, carry, clean, and vanish. What would you do if your own family looked you in the eyes and asked if you wanted to work for love? If they rewrote your role without your permission, would you speak up? Would you walk out, or would you, like me, freeze? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you were me? And let me know where you're watching from. Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. Comment your city, your strength, and your story. Now let me tell you mine. My name is June Merrill. I'm 68 years old, and for the majority of my life, I've been many things: wife, mother, nurse, caregiver, choir, director, baker, bookkeeper, and in the last few years, apparently the help. But let me start from before my identity was rewritten. I grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, back when neighbors still knew each other's names, and Sunday dinners weren't optional. I met my husband Paul in nursing school. He was studying to be a physician's assistant, and I was the top of my class in geriatric nursing. We married young, worked long hours, and built our first home with our bare hands and a few borrowed tools. Paul passed away 10 years ago. Lung cancer. It took him slow and cruel. He used to joke that I always knew what meds to argue for before the doctors even brought them up. I held his hand in that sterile hospice room while the world we built together faded like autumn leaves. After that, my focus became Andrew, our only son, my miracle. He was 32 when he married Camille. I was happy at first. She was bright, ambitious, strikingly beautiful, and she seemed to love him, or at least she knew how to wear the look of love convincingly. But even on their wedding day, there were cracks. She forgot to save me a seat near the front. My name wasn't on the place cards. When I mentioned it quietly to the planner, Camille overheard and gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, it's okay. You're easygoing. You don't need all the fuss, right?" I swallowed it. That's what I did. Again and again. Swallowed the tiny dismissals, the passive glances, the moments when she introduced me to her friends as Andrew's mom, with a tone that always implied, "Don't worry, she's not in the way." I moved into the guest house on their property shortly after they had their first child, Oliver. Camille said it would help everyone if I were close by. I agreed, thinking I'd be close to my grandson, not realizing that close came with conditions. Suddenly, I was babysitting 5 days a week, then 6. Then it became overnight care just this once. Diaper runs, grocery pickups, cooking for the family, cleaning up after everyone. At first, I told myself it was love. It was bonding. It was what any mother would do. But Camille rarely said thank you, and Andrew. He became quieter over time, more distant. A shadow of the boy who once called me every day from college, who cried on my shoulder the day Paul died. The woman who had married my son was slowly drawing the lines between us, and I let her. Because that's what mothers do, right? We adjust, we give, we bend. Until we break. Little did I know that comment, "Would you mind being the nanny officially?" wasn't the beginning. It was the moment the curtain lifted. The audience applauded, and I saw the full performance of my erasure unfold, scene by scene. It started small, subtle comments like shadows that only show when the light hits a certain way. I don't want Oliver getting confused about authority. We just want one parenting style in the house. That was the first time Camille stopped me from giving him a snack I had made banana bread from scratch, just like I used to make for Andrew. Another day, she came home and saw Oliver curled up in my lap for a nap. We're trying to get him to fall asleep in his bed. It's confusing for him when you do this. I nodded. But something in me tightened. I knew that tone. I'd heard it used by nurses to patients who were slipping into forgetfulness. Polite, smiling, patronizing. Soon after, I was no longer Grandma June. I became Nana, a name Oliver's other grandma, Camille's mother, used. "He's getting confused with all these different names," Camille said, waving it off as if my identity was interchangeable, disposable, like a set of unmatched napkins. Then came the silences. I'd walk into the kitchen while Camille and her friends were there. The chatter would stop. Smiles would stiffen. One of them once asked, "Oh, is that the nanny?" Camille didn't correct her. She laughed. Basically, that word stuck to me like mildew in the corners of the guest house. Basically, I stood there holding a tray of scones I had made for everyone, hands suddenly trembling. No one took one. I began keeping track. When my chair disappeared from the dinner table, when family group photos excluded me, when I offered to buy Oliver a small backpack with his initials, and Camille said, "We'd rather keep things minimal and aesthetic." Thanks, though. I had become an accessory in their household. A fixture, not a person. The guest house I lived in, once called the in-law suite, was now the pool house, according to Camille's Instagram captions. I overheard her once on a call. "Oh, it's just our nanny in the back," she said, not knowing I was behind the laundry room door, folding towels. "Just our nanny." The next day, when I found a printout on the kitchen counter that read, "Nanny Daily Responsibilities," I froze. My name was written at the top in cursive June. Underneath were bullet points. Wake Oliver by 7:30. Prepare organic breakfast. 45 minutes of reading time. No sugar treats after 2 p.m. No iPad unless Camille says so. Laundry, both children's and parents'. Dinner prep 4x a week. Tidy playroom. At the bottom, please confirm receipt of this list. We'd like to make it official by next week. Make it official. They didn't want a mother-in-law. They wanted an employee. One they didn't have to pay. One who didn't speak up. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the guest house, listening to Oliver's giggles float through the window, watching the garden I had planted with Paul slowly wilt. And I whispered to no one in particular, "I'm disappearing." What would you do if your family treated you like an unpaid employee in your own legacy? Let me know in the comments, especially if you're watching from Little Rock, Houston, or anywhere you once called home. It was Oliver's 5th birthday. The backyard was decorated in shades of mint green and pale yellow, with white streamers floating gently in the breeze. A sign read, "Oliver's Safari Adventure." Camille had hired a photographer, a balloon artist, and a local influencer mom to host the kids' games. I had baked Oliver's favorite, a chocolate and banana marble cake with dinosaur figurines on top. I'd started baking at dawn, just like I had done for Andrew when he was little. I placed it gently on the side table near the drinks, careful not to disturb the glossy cupcakes that had come from an expensive bakery. Then I saw Camille walking over, whispering something to the photographer. I thought it was a direction. But as the first family portrait was about to be taken, she gestured to me and said loud enough for the group to hear, "Let's just have immediate family, okay?" The photographer hesitated, then looked at me apologetically. Andrew stood frozen, unsure. But Camille looped her arm through his and tugged him toward the rest. And there I stood, holding a plate of sliced watermelon, smiling stiffly, not included, not important, not even a shadow in the frame. The photographer took the photo. I blinked back tears. Later, I retreated to the guest house. I wasn't angry. I was numb. Not even the children's laughter or the upbeat music could pierce that bubble of silence inside me. When the party ended and the sun dipped below the trees, I came back out to tidy up. The marble cake was untouched. The bakery cupcakes had been devoured. I wrapped the cake in foil and placed it quietly in the fridge. As I was turning to go, I heard Camille on the patio. She was laughing with a friend. She's helpful. She's here. She doesn't charge us. I told Andrew why not make it official. The friend asked something I didn't catch. Camille answered, "Yeah, like nanny official, with structure. I even made a duties list." They laughed. That night, I dialed my old friend Dorothy in Oregon. We hadn't spoken in years, but I needed a voice that remembered who I used to be. "I feel like I've been erased," I said. Dorothy didn't interrupt. She let me cry. She said, "June, honey, what they don't see is that you're still the one holding all the threads together. And when you stop, it'll all unravel." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dining table of the guest house, staring at the nanny duties sheet. Then I folded it slowly and placed it in a drawer. I opened my laptop, logged into my old email, and typed, "Dear Margaret, I hope this reaches you well. I might need your advice again, legal advice." My breath caught in my throat as I hit send. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. They didn't know I was quiet because I was preparing. The next morning, Camille left early to take Oliver to preschool. I stayed behind under the guise of tidying the kitchen. But what I was really doing was photographing every document she had stuck to the fridge under cartoon magnets. Her nanny schedule, the weekly budget list, and the babysitter payment breakdowns, each one had a tiny detail I needed. Camille had even listed my expected duties in a tone that felt more like corporate outsourcing than family care. Ensure lunch is prepared. Diaper changes. No personal phone use during active hours. Clean playroom before 4 p.m. I took pictures of all of it. Quietly, precisely, carefully. Later that day, I went up to the attic, my sanctuary long forgotten by everyone else. Under old blankets and boxes of Andrew's childhood memorabilia, I found my accordion file folder. Inside were the original home ownership documents, utility bills in my name, proof of the down payment I made 15 years ago, the very foundation of the house Camille now considered hers. I took them all. I contacted Margaret again, my old law school friend. We'd met back when I did temp clerical work at a firm during Andrew's college years. She had become a partner in a small but firm-handed property law office. We hadn't spoken in a decade. When she answered my call, I said, "I think I've been tricked into giving up my house." She replied without pause, "Then let's untangle that trick." While Camille and Andrew assumed I was making grilled cheese and folding laundry, I was sitting quietly at the library downtown, reading up on guardianship law, co-ownership statutes, and power of attorney abuse. I didn't ask questions out loud. I asked Google, asked librarians. I dug into every paper I'd signed after my surgery, and I started remembering. The week after my procedure, Camille had insisted on helping with bills. She had sat with me in the living room with a folder and a pen, saying, "Just sign here, June. It's a formality. We're just updating household paperwork, so things aren't confusing in case anything happens." She had smiled. I had trusted. Now I realized there had been no update. She had submitted a deed transfer naming Andrew as sole homeowner. And because we were family, no one questioned it. I felt foolish, but I also felt clear. Every evening, I slipped into the guest house with new notes, new findings, and printed bank statements. I discovered that Camille had also listed me as a resident caretaker on an insurance form, essentially erasing my title as a contributor to the home. Margaret's words stuck with me. The more silent you are now, the more powerful you'll be when it counts. Build your case like a fortress, not a firecracker. So I gathered evidence, day by day. Camille didn't notice. She was busy planning a mommy retreat in Santa Barbara. Andrew didn't notice. He was overwhelmed with work, leaning on me more than ever to pick up after Oliver, to organize birthday thank you cards, to cook, without ever asking how I was holding up. And all the while I smiled. I cooked. I kissed my grandson's forehead each night. But inside, I was a volcano, quiet but boiling, forming pressure. Knowing that when the eruption came, it would shift everything. I wasn't the nanny. I was the foundation, and they had underestimated what happens when a foundation begins to crack. It started with a dinner. Camille had invited a few of Andrew's colleagues over for a small celebration in honor of his latest promotion. The dining room was set like something out of a lifestyle magazine: gold-trimmed plates, floating candles, and a menu written in calligraphy on tiny cards she had ordered from Etsy. I stood quietly near the kitchen, wearing the apron she insisted I wear when on duty. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even acknowledged. I was expected to pass the hors d'oeuvres and refill glasses, but that night I had my own plan. As the laughter crescendoed and the wine flowed, Camille raised a toast. To Andrew, the anchor of this family and the provider of this beautiful home. I walked in, then slow, deliberate, holding a file folder. I didn't speak to her first. I turned to the guests, met each gaze with the quiet force of someone who had nothing left to lose. "I hope you're all enjoying the evening," I said, voice even, but carrying. "But since we're celebrating truth, let me offer one of my own." I set the folder down on the center of the table. Camille's smile twitched. Andrew froze. "These are the original deeds to this house. Dated 12 years before your wedding," I said, eyes fixed on my son. "They're in my name. And here are utility bills, proof of payment, tax statements, bank transfers, my retirement fund withdrawals, all showing that this home you live in, is mine." A silence so dense it seemed to change the air. Camille scoffed, putting on her best performance. "June, this isn't the time." I raised a hand, and here I continued, flipping to the next set of documents, "is a forged power of attorney filed while I was recovering from surgery. Signed by me, only the signature isn't mine." Andrew stood. "What are you saying?" I turned to him, my voice soft now. "I'm saying your wife submitted these forms, took my house from under me, and listed me on your insurance policy as a resident caretaker. She removed my name from the deed while I was under medication." Camille laughed. "Too high, too fake. Are we seriously entertaining this fantasy?" She's confused. Maybe the surgery. "Enough," I said, louder than I ever had in this house. Everyone froze. Margaret walked in through the side entrance, then briefcase in hand, perfectly timed. Camille's face turned ghost white. "I'm June's attorney," Margaret said, placing a stack of notarized evidence beside mine. and we've filed a petition to reverse the fraudulent deed transfer, a claim for elder financial abuse, and depending on how this evening goes, potential criminal charges. Andrew looked like he'd been hit with a tidal wave. Camille, tell me this isn't true, he said, eyes wide. Camille swallowed. Her mask cracked. I was trying to protect the family assets. She wasn't thinking clearly. I thought we were doing the right thing. No, I said gently. You were doing the convenient thing. Camille turned to me, fury and desperation boiling. You cook for him, clean watch our child, and you still want to play queen of the castle. You should be grateful we even let you stay here. I looked her in the eye, calm as the eye of a storm. I built this house. I held my husband's hand as we signed the mortgage. I went without so your husband could finish college. You think calling me the nanny will make me small? It only makes you petty. Camille stormed out of the dining room, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell from the wall. Andrew sat back down, hands in his hair, shame heavy on his shoulders. I looked at him and said, "You let it happen. But I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm fixing it myself." And I walked out of the room. For the first time in years, my spine felt straight, my heart steady. I was no longer silent. The house was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. Camille stopped speaking to me entirely, choosing instead to communicate through sticky notes. Oliver's snack is in the fridge. Don't forget laundry. Don't let him nap after 4 p.m. Each message was clipped cold and clearly meant to maintain her illusion of control. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. I had officially reopened my personal bank accounts, frozen the joint fund Andrew had access to, which he conveniently forgot was originally seeded with my inheritance. I also terminated the automatic payments I had been making for their credit card debt and private school fees. Within a week, Camille received her first bounce notification Oliver's tuition installment had failed. Then came the mortgage payment, the phone bill, even the streaming subscriptions she never once thanked me for covering. She confronted Andrew first. "You told me your mom was still covering this." He was stunned. I didn't think she'd actually cut us off. Not like this. "Oh, but I did," I said, entering the room with a folder of account closures and a small check made out to myself from the escrow reversal I'd just filed. "You wanted a nanny. Camille nannies get paid. And this one is officially out of service." Andrew looked hurt, almost childlike. "Mom, we're your family." I nodded, keeping my expression even. That's why I stayed as long as I did. But when family begins to see you as staff, unpaid, unappreciated staff, it's time to draw the line. Camille tried to maintain her cool. "Fine. We'll figure it out without you. This house isn't even yours anymore. It will be again," I said firmly. "The judge has already granted a temporary freeze on any sales or refinancing. And once we win the petition, your names will be removed from the title." For the first time, her eyes registered real panic. "You can't do that. We live here." I met her stare. "So did I, until you decided I didn't belong." By the end of the month, the cracks in their lifestyle widened. Camille's credit cards were declined at a designer boutique. Their grocery delivery was downgraded from organic selections to a generic store brand. They missed 2 private school parent meetings because they were scrambling to refinance their expenses. I meanwhile moved out by choice, not to a nursing home or a spare room at a distant relative's house. I moved in with Lorraine, my college roommate, now retired, and living in a restored farmhouse outside the city. Her kitchen smelled like coffee and old music, and her library was filled with quiet wisdom. There I rested, but not for long. I began consulting again this time as a part-time legal assistant for women navigating elder abuse and financial fraud. My story was unfortunately not unique. But that meant I had work to do. I called it my quiet revolution. While Camille spiraled into spreadsheets and Andrew stumbled through budget apps, I was rebuilding not just my finances, but my spirit. They hadn't just underestimated me, they forgot who raised the man they now leaned on, and that I would never let happen again. At Lorraine's farmhouse, the mornings began slowly. Birdsong filtered through the open windows, and the scent of rosemary wafted in from her herb garden. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waking up to cook for anyone, clean up after anyone, or anticipate what new insult Camille might hurl my way. I was free. I took long walks down dirt roads with old boots and a thermos of tea. Lorraine and I talked like we were back in college about poetry, music, the books we never finished writing. We even joked about becoming late life roommates for good. Two grannies and a dream, she'd say, pouring wine into mismatched mugs. But I wasn't done with the world yet. After everything Camille had done, the legal maneuvering, the emotional warfare, the way she'd tried to reduce me to nothing but unpaid labor, I knew I had to fight, not just for myself, but for other women like me. Women who built homes with their bare hands and were later told they didn't belong in them. So I reactivated my paralegal license. With a few calls and Lorraine's help, I got a consulting role with a non-profit that supported elder women facing familial eviction and financial exploitation. My experience wasn't just a wound, it was a roadmap. I started traveling to local community centers giving talks. My story always started the same way. My daughter-in-law once asked me if I'd like to be the nanny officially. That was the day I stopped being quiet. The women in the audience would lean in, some nodding, some tearing up. I could feel their pain mirrored in my own, but also their power waiting just beneath the surface. The money I earned from the speaking and consulting was modest at first, but it wasn't about the income. It was about dignity, control, ownership. Meanwhile, the legal case over the house escalated. Camille had tried to countersue, claiming the house deed transfer had been a gift of gratitude. But the forensic handwriting analysis, along with testimony from my old notary friend, who confirmed I was unconscious and in the hospital at the time of the signing, told another story. The judge ruled in my favor. I regained full ownership of the house, but I didn't move back in. Instead, I put it on the market, donated part of the proceeds to the non-profit, and used the rest to buy a quiet cottage of my own, not far from Lorraine's. I painted the walls a soft shade of blue, hung up the photos Camille once told me were outdated, and planted marigolds in the front yard. My granddaughter once loved marigolds, and I waited, not for reconciliation or apologies or redemption, but for the day I would look in the mirror and see myself fully again. And that day came. It came when I walked into a courtroom in a pressed navy suit, carrying a binder of another woman's story, ready to help her do what I did. Stand tall, speak plainly, and never ever ask for permission to matter. I had been erased once, but now I was the ink. The first letter arrived, folded and unassuming, no return address, just my name in bold pen strokes. Inside was a birthday card, unsigned, but unmistakably written by Amelia. The handwriting was too precise, the phrasing too formal for a child, yet the words had weight. "Grandma, I miss your pancakes. I miss your garden. Are you still mad?" I sat at my kitchen table, the card in one hand, the silence in the other. I wasn't mad, I was fractured. But anger had long since faded into something sharper clarity. A week later came the voicemail from Ryan. "Mom, I know things got out of hand. Camille, she's struggling. She says things when she's overwhelmed. Amelia's been asking about you. Maybe we could talk. Talk. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. Not when my son stood silently while my dignity was auctioned off behind my back. Not when he watched me sign away the house I built and let Camille call it generosity. But then came the envelope from the county courthouse. A lawyer had submitted an updated guardianship request for Amelia, filed by Camille. My name was nowhere on it, not even as emergency backup. I reread the document 5 times. The anger I thought I'd buried returned not as fire but as ice. Steady, sharp, legal. I made my decision. With the help of the same legal team that had restored my deed, I filed a petition for visitation rights and simultaneously temporary shared custody. I knew the internet would explode. A grandmother suing her own son. She's overstepping. She's brave. She's bitter. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this to win back a child like she was a trophy. I was doing it so that Amelia, my Amelia, would know that when someone loves you right, they do not vanish into silence when it gets hard. They do not fold under pressure. They fight. Ryan called me. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just said one line. "Is this really who you want to be remembered as?" I replied without hesitation. "No, but it's better than being forgotten entirely." The hearing date was set. The media got wind. An op-ed was published with the headline, "The New Face of Family Betrayal When Blood Fights Blood." But they missed the point. It wasn't betrayal. It was reclamation. The morning of the hearing, I wore a soft grey suit, not the power navy. I didn't want to intimidate. I wanted to be seen. The courtroom was filled not just with observers, but with other grandmothers, other mothers. People like me, some whispering, some nodding. When the judge asked why I was pursuing this course, I didn't read from notes. I looked straight at her and said, "Because love is not silent, and I won't let mine be buried under legal paperwork and cold breakfasts." The judge listened. Camille's lawyer spoke of stability and routine. Ryan sat 2 rows behind her. He looked older, tired, maybe sorry, maybe not. In the end, the judge granted bi-monthly visitation and ordered family counseling. Online, the debate raged. Some cheered me, some condemned me. But I didn't need to be everyone's hero. I just needed to be Amelia's. Still, when I got home that night, I poured tea with trembling hands and sat in the dark a long while. I knew this wasn't the end. It was a turning point, a line drawn in a long, painful sand. And sometimes, even when you win, you still ache. I whispered to myself, did I go too far? But in the silence, I heard my heart respond. No, you finally went far enough. It was a Saturday in late autumn when I saw her again. Not through glass, not across a courtroom, not with tension humming in the background. Just in a park, where the wind carried the scent of cinnamon from a nearby food cart, and the trees wore their golden armor proudly. Amelia was chasing leaves. Her little boots crushed the ground with purpose, and her laughter— God, I had forgotten how it sounded when it wasn't echoing through a phone line or a second-hand update. Just pure, unfiltered joy. Ryan sat on a bench nearby. He didn't rise when he saw me. He gave a small nod, the kind that means I see you but I don't know what to say. I didn't walk over. I waited. Amelia was the one who ran. "Grandma," I knelt just in time to catch her. My arms instinctively knowing the curve of her back, the shape of her shoulders. She smelled like maple syrup and library books. Her hair had grown longer. Her voice was clearer. "I told Mommy I wanted to see you." She pulled back and squinted at me with those curious, sharp eyes. "You look different." I smiled. "I am." She told me about her new school, her friend named Zoe, the way Camille bought her a puppy to make things better. But what she really wanted was to play in my garden again. to make lemonade with real lemons, not from powder, to read that fairy tale book with the ripped cover and the scribbled ending. I remember everything she whispered. That nearly broke me. We spent the rest of the visit gathering leaves and pretending they were treasure maps. Ryan eventually walked over, keeping his distance. "She's missed you," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I know," I replied. Then quietly, "And you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded photo, a family picture. Camille, Ryan, Amelia, and an empty space next to them. "She wouldn't smile," he said, referring to Amelia. "She said it wasn't a family photo without you." That night, I placed that picture in a drawer, not out of spite, but to remind myself how far I'd come. Not to bury the pain, but to acknowledge it. I hadn't returned to the house I lost. I hadn't forgiven Camille. And I still didn't know if Ryan would ever be my son the way he once was. But I had my name back, my time, my peace. I didn't need a seat at their table anymore. I had built my own, and when I closed my eyes that night, the last words I whispered weren't for them. They were for me. I don't want the old life. I want the new story. And in case anyone ever doubted, I'm Margaret Lively. And I was never just the nanny. I was the foundation. Before this story ends, let me ask you something from the bottom of my heart. Have you ever poured your soul into a family, only to be told you were just the help? Have you ever built a home only to be made a stranger in it? Have you ever sat quietly accepting the little cuts, the polite insults, until one day you couldn't anymore? If you have, or if you've ever wondered what you would do in my shoes, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me your city. Tell me what you would have done. Whether you're in Dallas, Detroit, Hanoi, or Helsinki, your voice matters. And if you felt even a spark of strength, of anger, of justice in this story, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel. There's more. More voices. More truths. More women rising after being pushed aside. Because sometimes the quietest woman turns out to be the loudest echo. And sometimes a story like this, it's not fiction, it's a mirror.